What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here. Today, we are going to talk about some pricing on what I'm going to classify as, let's call them end user cards. Now, don't get me wrong, any card is perfectly flippable, but I think a lot of the cards on this particular list that we're going to go over, and I got 3 different charts, one for each of the major sports to look at, are more cards that collectors are going to go after. A fan of the player, a fan of the team, whatever the case might be. The other thing with these are, outside of LeBron, who is the only current player, I believe, that I used, every other player is currently not playing. And most of these cards, if not maybe even all of them, are from the 80s, 90s, and with the exception of LeBron, the early 2000s. He was the only one, I think, from the early 2000s. And I did something similar to this about 3-4 months ago, maybe, but I included in a lot of vintage on that. And what actually sent me down this path was, and this has kind of been on a list for a while, I've been thinking about going off of, and what popped this was 2 cards that I saw recently, but I'm like, you know what? That would be something interesting I wouldn't mind going after as the next little like collection thing. I was a huge baseball fan in the 90s. Obviously, I have my 90s Indians that I was a massive fan of. I loved baseball throughout the 90s. I still do today, but not as much as I did as a kid. I think baseball in the 90s was just on a different level. And like I said, it's probably just through my lens because of the age that I was. But, you know, Clemens, Bonds, McGuire, Sosa, the Indians, Griffey, Randy Johnson, just all, there were so many guys. That Braves pitching staff with Maddox, Smoltz, and Glavine. Just so many iconic players in my mind come from that 80s and 90s era. And I've been thinking about going back and starting like a little collection of my favorite players from that era, just their base PSA 10 Topps card. The exceptions, some might be PSA 9s. If you get in like Tony Gwynn's, I don't have that kind of money to throw around. And some of the other ones can get pretty pricey with some of the older guys, but Tony Gwynn's another one. So I was, the 2 cards that popped up were the 89 Griffey in a PSA 10, and the 86 Topps Barry Bonds and the 86 Topps Bo Jackson are all cards that I would really like to have at some point in time. I'm in no hurry. I'm in no rush. And I was curious when I started poking around on prices on them, and I was like, these, spoilers have actually performed pretty well. So we're going to look at basketball, baseball, and football. And we'll kind of wrap up at the end. I have a couple thoughts after we kind of review through some of this stuff. So let's look at basketball first. Once again, Market Movers, a link in the description down below. You can get a free trial or 20% off for life if you want to play around with your own version of charts and graphs. Now, some of these, I downgraded the grades slightly because they could get insanely expensive in PSA 10s. Even some of these are pretty pricey in PSA 10s. And I am going back almost 13 months. I went back a year, and then I just ended up rounding up to April 1st, 2024. So 12 and a half, 12 and 3/4 months on these charts. LeBron, 2003 Topps Chrome Refractor in a PSA 9. Over that time period, up 24%. Once again, remember, LeBron is the only active player on this list. 86 Jordan in a PSA 8. Up 13%. Bird Magic, the 80 Topps, and Irving. PSA 8 up 12%. Non-rookie, but an iconic card that a lot of people collect, 2008 Topps Chrome, PSA 10 LeBron, Chalk Toss Refractor, up 65%. Scoring Kings, 93 Fleer Ultra Jordan in a PSA 8. I own a BGS 8.5 of this. Up 17%. I should note I own a PSA 9 of the Chalk Toss Refractor. And then last but not least, a 96 Kobe PSA 9 Star Date. I would like to own this card. up 15%. So all of those up at minimum 12%, and in some cases more. And like I said, I try to pick 5 cards in grades that transact often enough that there is clear comp lines on it. It's not something where one sells every 6 months or anything crazy like that. And cards that I felt were iconic to a degree, that were like, a lot of people would want these in their collections. So that was my quick list for basketball. Obviously, this list could have been 10, 15, 20 cards long. This was the 5 that I chose. A couple of them I own. A couple of them I am chasing. So I was actually just kind of curious about the pricing on it. Let's look at baseball. Baseball. 89 Griffey. PSA 10. Up 25%. This card's at over $2,500 now. And just keeps climbing. Look at that's the dark blue line on this chart. And just keeps on going up, 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 and away. I think this is one that I want to lock down sooner rather than later. I know they're all over the place. They're relatively easy to find to a degree. But I wouldn't mind knocking one of those off the list. Next, 85 Topps Roger Clemens. Up 13%. Once again, not massive percentages. You're not going to the bank. You're not paying off your house with these. But you're just seeing slow and steady increases across the board, and not all the randomness of ultra modern and the overinflated population counts and the repack nonsense. And oh my God, I need to flip that. And oh my God, you got room, bro. And all this stuff, I think, comes into play a lot less in these cards. Next, 86 Bo Jackson, PSA 10. This one flat, up about 3%. 86 Topps Barry Bonds, up 20%. Nice little movement up on that absolutely iconic card, along with that 86 Bo Jackson. And then, even though I could not stand him in the World Series, what I personally think one of the greatest pitchers to ever throw, Greg Maddux, 87 Donruss, PSA 10, up about 20%. I remember chasing that card as a kid, trying to track this one down. Insane pitcher. Just absolutely insane. Now, once again, across the board, ups. Bo Jackson slightly up, but everybody else 15 to 20, 25% up over the last year plus. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Football. We have some red on this chart. Let's run through these. Tom Brady Bowman Chrome in a PSA 10, up 24%. So Brady still doing pretty good. Jerry Rice, 86 Topps PSA 9, down 7%. Joe Montana, 81 Topps PSA 9, down 15%. Tom Brady Bowman Base, wanted something a little bit cheaper, in a PSA 9, up 17%. Barry Sanders 89 Score, down 7%. And then 1998 Peyton Manning Topps Chrome, PSA 10, up 15%. So I don't know if it's just the 80s guys aren't getting the love like the 2000s guys do. I guess Manning is technically 1998, I should note. But Brady and Manning getting slight increases. Rice, Montana, and Sanders all getting slight decreases. And I don't really know why that is. I do think part of it, that 80s, 90s era of baseball, a lot of that stuff that we just looked at, and baseball in general, in my opinion, and it's pretty common sense, has the largest and strongest overall collector base. 90s, 80s, early 2000s basketball, Jordans, Kobe's, LeBron's, that sort of stuff, also has an extremely large, passionate, not afraid to spend money collector base. I don't know if that's there for football yet. I think you do see it with the more modern guys, hence the Brady and the Peyton Manning showing some green, but I don't know if it's there for the 80s guys. Now, I picked 3. Maybe you could pick another 3 or 4 and it would show something completely different. But I thought that these were, when you think of late 80s, early 90s football, these are the guys that you think of. I could have included some Cowboys, but I was trying to keep these lists relatively short. I think I did glance at Emmitt Smith's and Troy Aikman's, and they were basically flat to maybe slightly down. So, maybe performing a little bit better than the 49ers guys and Barry Sanders, but not much. But these guys, a very much mixed bag compared to what we saw in the other sports. And my theory here is I think the overall football collector base is still finding itself. Football is ultra popular now. In the 80s and 90s, baseball was the king. And I think there's a lot more people that have a passion to collect cards of those 80s and 90s baseball and basketball players than there are the football players. That's just my guess. I have no idea for sure. There's obviously no way to know that, but that's just my kind of hypothesis looking at the numbers. So that was kind of my one big takeaway. My other big takeaway is just how slow and steady this stuff is. We're past the COVID craziness now. I could look at a 1-year chart on cards and it's not impacted by all the COVID nonsense. There was a time when that was the case. You couldn't look at historical data because there would be this huge run up and you kind of had to figure out when things flattened back out again and started creeping back up. Now I could go a year back and we're all clear of that. So whatever you want to call these types of cards, true collector cards, whatever, I am not calling them vintage. They're from the 80s and the 90s. You get that vintage comment, the hell out of here. They are not vintage to me. These are the cards that I grew up with, damn it. Anyway, these cards showing slow, steady progression upwards. Now, that could change in a heartbeat. The world right now is a wild place. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. By the time I'm recording this video the night before, by the time it goes live, God knows what could be going on out there. But as of right now, these cards performing pretty well. Slow and steady wins the race, they say. They're removed from the repack nonsense, though, repackers won't hesitate to buy one of these cards if it fits. A LeBron refractor or a Jordan will do well in there, but they're relatively removed from that downtown kaboom craziness and all that. And they are not affected by the whims of whatever happens on the field. So-and-so didn't make the Super Bowl. So-and-so blew out his arm. So-and-so blew out his knee. You don't have any of that nonsense going on either. But that's all I got for you, boys and girls. Curious for your thoughts and comments. We will catch you on the next one. Peace.